In the glittering heights of Chicago's financial empire, James Reynolds once ruled as a titan, building fortunes with a keystroke, his name etched on skyscrapers that pierced the sky. But betrayal struck like lightning. His lifelong partner, Victor Blackwood, orchestrated a ruthless scheme, stripping him of everything in mere weeks. Now at 58, James stared out from a dingy apartment window, swirling the last drop of fine whiskey, his reflection a ghost of the man he once was. "What legacy did I truly leave?" he whispered to the empty room, the weight of isolation crushing him. Before we dive into this incredible tale of redemption and genius, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Morning coffee in New York or late night vibes in London? I'd love to know. As rain lashed the streets below, James stepped out into the storm, drawn by an inexplicable pull. There, huddled under an awning, was a small girl selling delicate origami animals, her eyes holding secrets far beyond her 8 years. Little did he know, this chance meeting would unearth a mind capable of reshaping worlds. But at what cost? Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. The roar of applause still echoed in James Reynolds' mind, a ghost from a life that now felt like a fever dream. He could almost taste the champagne bubbles on his tongue, feel the firm handshakes of Wall Street moguls as they toasted his latest triumph. To empire builders, they had cheered, his name synonymous with unassailable success. Reynolds Financial Group, built from a single desk in a cramped office to a behemoth spanning continents, had been his throne. At the pinnacle, on the 52nd floor of a gleaming tower that bore his name in gold lettering, he had commanded billions with the flick of a pen, markets bending to his will like reeds in the wind. But that was before the fall, before Victor Blackwood, his partner of 3 decades, the man he'd called brother, unleashed the betrayal that shattered it all. In 6 merciless weeks, Blackwood had woven a web of deceit, falsified reports, offshore transfers, and whispers in the right ears. The empire crumbled overnight, shares plummeting like stones into an abyss. Headlines screamed, "Financial Titan toppled," and James, once the architect of fortunes, became a cautionary tale. Mansions sold at auction, yachts seized, even his collection of rare whiskeys liquidated. Save for one last bottle, now half empty on the scarred wooden table before him. Now, in a modest apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, the air thick with the musty scent of neglect, James swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler, the last relic of his former glory. The room was a tomb of faded ambitions, stacks of yellowed financial journals piled in corners, a cracked leather armchair sagging under invisible weight, and a window smeared with city grime, offering a mocking view of the skyline he once owned. At 58, his once impeccable suits hung loose on a frame worn by stress, deep lines etching his face like fractures in marble. The doctor's warning from that morning replayed in his head. "Your blood pressure is a time bomb, Mr. Reynolds. The stress is killing you." He laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the silence. Of course it was. Watching 30 years dissolve into nothingness would break anyone. What legacy did I truly leave, he wondered, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Numbers on screens, buildings soon to be rebranded, fortunes that evaporated like mist. Had it all been an illusion? A game of abstractions where real lives, employees' retirements, investors' dreams were mere collateral? The nightmares came unbidden, standing helpless in the boardroom as alarms blared, security escorts marching him out amid pitying stares. Blackwood's face, smug and unrepentant, haunted him most. "To empire builders," James whispered mockingly, raising his glass to the empty room before downing the burn in one swallow. Outside, the first snow of the season had given way to a relentless downpour, transforming Chicago's streets into rivers of gray despair. The distant wail of sirens pierced the rain's monotonous drum, pulling James from his reverie. Real people down there, he thought, hurrying through lives untouched by boardroom betrayals. For months, he'd barricaded himself in this refuge-turned-prison, avoiding the world that had discarded him. But today, something shifted, a quiet rebellion against the void. He set down the empty tumbler, pulled on a worn coat that smelled faintly of mothballs, and stepped out into the storm without purpose, letting the rain mask the tears he'd long denied. The cold slapped him like a rebuke, water seeping through his shoes as he wandered aimlessly. Downtown's twinkling lights mocked him from afar, financial fortresses where his name had once shone brightest. He almost turned back, the weight of failure pulling him homeward, but a gust of wind whipped through the alley, carrying with it a flutter of paper. It danced erratically before settling at his feet. A delicate origami fox, its folds precise and intricate, somehow unscathed by the deluge. Curious, James knelt to retrieve it, his fingers brushing the damp cardboard, where a small figure huddled beneath a tattered bookstore awning. She couldn't have been more than 8, cross-legged on a sodden piece of flattened box, surrounded by an array of paper creations. Swans, foxes, cranes, each a marvel of patience and skill. Her clothes were threadbare, a too large jacket swallowing her frame, but her hands moved with quiet efficiency, arranging her wares against the encroaching rain. Their eyes met, and James froze. Hers were startlingly alert, a depth that belied her youth. Wary, intelligent, and impossibly old, as if she'd seen storms far fiercer than this one. "Would you like to buy one, sir?" Her voice cut through the downpour, clear and steady, without the whine of desperation. "They're $1 each, but they'll last forever if you keep them dry." He examined the fox in his hand, marveling at the precision of its folds, the way it captured cunning in mere paper. "Did you make these yourself?" he asked, kneeling closer, the rain forgotten. "Yes, sir. The swan is the hardest, but the fox is my favorite." She arranged another piece with businesslike care, her small fingers deft and unchildlike. James felt an unfamiliar stir, something protective, a spark in the numbness that had gripped him since the fall. "My name is James. What's yours?" "Sophia," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "Where are your parents, Sophia?" Her hands stilled for a fraction of a second. "My grandmother's in the hospital. I'm taking care of things until she gets better." Across the street, 2 men lingered in the shadows, their eyes fixed on the girl with unsettling interest. James's instincts, honed from years of corporate intrigue, prickled. He glanced at his wallet, finding 2 20s. "How much for your entire inventory?" Her eyes widened, then narrowed in calculation. 23 pieces today. Keep the change." He handed over the bills. "You must be hungry. Would you like something to eat?" Hesitation flickered, but she nodded, gathering her belongings into a frayed backpack. As they walked toward a nearby diner, James noticed her absently tracing patterns on the origami fox she'd let him keep. Lines that looked suspiciously like equations, etched faintly in pencil. What secrets hid behind those ancient eyes? Little did James know, this fragile paper creature was the first fold in a destiny that would rebuild his shattered world, or unravel it completely. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed like distant thunder, casting a harsh glow over worn vinyl booths and the faint aroma of grease and coffee. James slid into a seat across from Sophia, the origami fox still clutched in his hand, its penciled lines nagging at the edges of his curiosity. She perched on the edge of the bench, backpack hugged tight to her chest like a shield, her eyes scanning the room with the vigilance of someone who'd learned early that trust was a luxury. "Order whatever you like," James said, pushing the laminated menu toward her. His voice felt rusty, unused to kindness after months of solitude. The waitress, a weary woman with a name tag reading Marge, ambled over, pencil poised. Sophia glanced at the menu briefly. "A grilled cheese sandwich, please, and milk." James ordered the same, though his appetite had long since fled. As they waited, silence settled between them, broken only by the clinking of cutlery from nearby tables. He studied her, the way her fingers drummed a rhythmic pattern on the table, not idly, but with purpose, as if calculating something unseen. "Tell me about your origami," he ventured. "How did you learn to make them so precisely?" She shrugged, her small shoulders rising like fragile wings. "Grandma showed me the basics. The rest I figured out. It's like folding numbers. Each crease has to balance, or it falls apart." Numbers? The word tugged at him, a faint echo from his old life. Before he could probe, Marge returned with their plates, the sandwiches steaming faintly. Sophia attacked hers with focused intensity, as if unsure when the next meal might come. Between bites, she pulled a napkin from the dispenser and began scribbling, her pencil moving in swift, deliberate strokes. James leaned forward, glancing at her work. What he saw stole his breath. Not doodles or childish sketches, but complex equations, derivatives, risk models, formulations that danced on the edge of advanced finance. His mind, dulled by betrayal but still sharp from decades in the markets, recognized them instantly. Stochastic processes for predicting volatility, the kind he'd used to build his empire. But these were elegant, refined, with shortcuts he hadn't seen in textbooks. What What are you working on there? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia froze, her hands snapping over the napkin like a vault door slamming shut. Just numbers. They help me think. He reached out gently, not to take it, but to uncover a corner. These aren't just numbers, Sophia. This is sophisticated. Who taught you this? Her eyes met his, defiant yet vulnerable, a storm brewing in their depths. No one. I watch people, patterns, books from the library, old ones they throw out. Math doesn't need a teacher, it just needs you to look. James sat back, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. An 8-year-old, homeless and alone, crafting financial algorithms? It strained belief. You're telling me you learned this on your own, from discarded books? She nodded, but her grip tightened on the napkin. Why does that surprise you? Adults think kids can't see what's right in front of them. But numbers don't lie. They predict things, like when the rain will stop or when people will buy more origami on busy days. He unfolded the napkin fully now, with her reluctant permission. One equation stood out, a probabilistic model, variables weaving through time series data. But at its core, it wasn't abstract finance. It was personal. Inputs for hospital stays, recovery rates, and survival odds. This is about your grandmother, isn't it? Sophia's face crumpled for the first time, the mask cracking. The doctors say her stroke might not. She taught me to count before I could talk. I thought if I calculated right, I could make her better. But the numbers, they don't always cooperate. A protective ache bloomed in James's chest, unfamiliar and raw. Here was a child wielding math not as a tool for profit, but as a lifeline against chaos. His own losses paled in comparison. The billions gone in Blackwood's scheme were cold figures. This was flesh and blood. Sophia, how long have you been alone? 3 weeks. Her voice was small now, the wariness returning. I don't want foster care. They split people up, like bad equations. The rain hammered harder against the diner's window, mirroring the turmoil inside him. He thought of his empty apartment, a prison of regrets, and the doctor's words about stress killing him. What harm in one night? It's getting late, and the storm's worsening. I have an extra room. It's just my office, but the sofa pulls out. You can stay tonight, and we'll figure out tomorrow. She studied him, those ancient eyes weighing risks in an instant. Why help me? Most people walk by. Because, James said, surprising himself with the truth, I know what it's like to have the world walk by you. They left the diner together, the origami fox tucked safely in his pocket. Back at the apartment, he improvised a bed, clearing stacks of financial documents that now seemed relics of a feudal life. Sophia curled up almost immediately, exhaustion claiming her small frame. James lingered in the doorway, watching her steady breathing, overwhelmed by the strange pivot his day had taken. Hours later, in the dead of night, a muffled cry pierced the silence. He rushed in, finding her tangled in sheets, thrashing against invisible foes. No, the numbers are wrong. He's wrong, she murmured half asleep, her words laced with urgency. James froze, heart pounding. Who was he, and what numbers haunted her dreams? As he sat beside her, gently smoothing the blanket, he sensed this girl carried secrets that could either heal his broken world or drag him deeper into the abyss. The murmur faded into the quiet hum of the apartment's old radiator, but James remained seated beside Sophia's bed, long after her breathing steadied. Her words lingered like smoke. The numbers are wrong, he's wrong. A cryptic echo that stirred unease in his gut. Who was this he haunting her dreams? And what shadows from her past clung to those equations? Dawn crept through the blinds, painting the room in pale gray, and James rose stiffly, his mind a whirl of questions. For the first time in months, the solitude of his fall felt pierced by something vital, a fragile connection that demanded he step up, however clumsily. Morning brought a tentative routine, born of necessity and instinct. James rummaged through his nearly bare kitchen, determined to prove he could provide more than shelter. Eggs, bread, a carton of milk. He assembled what he hoped resembled breakfast, the sizzle of the pan filling the air with a comforting, if amateurish, aroma. Sophia emerged from the office-turned-bedroom, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes cautious but less guarded than the night before. "Sit," he said, plating scrambled eggs that were more charred than golden. I'm not much of a cook, but it's edible, I think." She poked at the eggs with a fork, a small smile tugging at her lips. The first he'd seen, fleeting but genuine. Grandma's were always fluffy. She said the secret was folding them like origami. Gentle turns, not too much heat. James chuckled, the sound surprising him. "Folding eggs? Well, mine are more like crumpled paper. Next time you teach me." As they ate, the conversation flowed in fits and starts, Sophia's wariness melting under the warmth of shared silence. He learned fragments of her world. The hospital visits where she'd sneak in math books. The street corners optimized for origami sales based on foot traffic patterns she'd calculated. In return, he shared scraps of his own downfall, not the gritty details of Blackwood's treachery, but the hollowness it left. "I built things that vanished overnight," he admitted, "like sandcastles washed away." Sophia nodded, tracing a pattern on her plate with her fork. "Sandcastles are just bad math. Wrong foundation. You need better variables." Her insight cut deep, a child's wisdom piercing his regrets. After breakfast, he cleared space on the bookshelves, stacking his dusty investment tomes to make room for whatever she might need. "We'll get you some clothes, books. Proper ones, not library discards." But trust wasn't built in a morning. That night, another cry echoed through the walls. James hurried in, finding her bolt upright, sheets twisted around her like chains. "The shadows! They chase!" she gasped, eyes wide with terror. He sat on the bed's edge, hesitant, then placed a hand on her shoulder. Light, reassuring. "It's okay. You're safe here." Words felt inadequate, but he stayed, his presence a silent anchor until her breathing slowed. In the dim light, he noticed crumbs under her pillow, a half-eaten cracker, an apple core wrapped in a napkin. Hoarded food, a relic of survival. The next day, he didn't mention it outright. Instead, over lunch, a simple soup he'd managed not to burn, he said softly, "In this home, there's always enough. No need to hide." Sophia's eyes flickered with doubt, then softened. "On the streets, you hide everything. Once I almost got caught. 2 men, like the ones watching yesterday. I used numbers to escape, counted steps, predicted their path, hid in an alley with the best shadows." James's heart clenched, imagining her small form dodging dangers he'd only read about in reports. "You shouldn't have had to do that alone." She shrugged, but her voice trembled. "Math saved me. It always does." The days blurred into a rhythm of adaptation. James enrolled in a basic cooking class at the community center, returning with groceries and tales of his disasters that made Sophia giggle, a sound like wind chimes in his sterile apartment. He bought her a sketchbook for her equations, watching in awe as she filled pages with models that predicted everything from weather shifts to pedestrian flows. In turn, she taught him origami, their evenings spent folding paper into animals, each crease a lesson in patience. Yet challenges mounted. School was the first battleground. After navigating paperwork with a social worker named Rebecca, who eyed him skeptically but approved temporary guardianship, Sophia started at the local elementary. Her assessments stunned the staff. Placed 2 grades ahead, she still outpaced the curriculum. But brilliance bred friction. The call came during James's first solo attempt at lasagna, the kitchen hazy with smoke from an overbaked tray. "Mr. Reynolds? This is Mrs. Winters, Sophia's math teacher. We need to discuss her behavior." His protective instincts flared. "What happened?" "She corrected my solutions in front of the class, publicly, suggested a more efficient method. It disrupted everything." That evening, they sat on the living room floor amid scattered workbooks. Sophia traced patterns on the carpet, avoiding his gaze. "I didn't mean to embarrass her, but her way took 14 extra steps. Mine simplifies it, like folding a fox instead of a messy crane." James examined her workbook. The elegance of her approach was undeniable. "You're right, but being right isn't always enough. We have to navigate people too, not just numbers." She looked up, eyes earnest. "I just want things to make sense. On the streets, wrong calculations meant no food." He wrapped an arm around her, the gesture feeling more natural now. "Here, we'll figure it out together." Nights brought deeper trials. The nightmares persisted, Sophia waking in sobs, fighting phantoms. By the third occurrence, James had learned. No questions, just presence. He'd sit quietly, sometimes folding origami by lamplight until she drifted off. One morning, changing sheets, he found more hidden food, crackers, fruit, stashed in clever spots. "Trust takes time," he murmured to himself, vowing to earn it. The apartment transformed subtly. Children's books mingled with math texts on shelves, the fridge door blooming with A's from school papers. 6 weeks in, another call shattered the fragile peace. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Principal Morales. We've evaluated Sophia further. Her abilities, they're unprecedented. But we need to talk placement. She's seeing patterns we can't even teach." James's pulse quickened, pride warring with fear. What if her genius drew unwanted attention? As he hung up, Sophia entered, clutching a new origami creation. A delicate bird, its wings etched with faint equations. "Dad," she said tentatively, the words slipping out for the first time. "Am I in trouble?" He knelt, heart swelling. "No, my brilliant girl. But the world might not be ready for you." Little did he know the call was just the beginning, a summons to a gala where her mind would clash with shadows from his past, igniting a fire that could consume them both. Sophia's origami bird rested on the kitchen table like a talisman, its paper wings inscribed with equations that seemed to whisper secrets. James stared at it, the principal's words still ringing in his ears. Unprecedented abilities, patterns beyond teaching. Pride swelled in him, but so did a gnawing fear. What if her brilliance shone too brightly, attracting the wrong eyes? The invitation had arrived that afternoon, heavy cream stationery from the Chicago Financial Foundation's annual gala, an event he'd once chaired. A handwritten note from Margaret Chen, a rare ally during his downfall. It would mean the world to see you there. He hadn't planned to go, but the principal's call twisted fate. "They want to discuss specialized programs," Morales had said. "Perhaps university ties. But first, exposure. Show her the world she could conquer." From Sophia's perspective, the world felt both thrilling and terrifying. She stood before the mirror in her new navy blue dress, the fabric soft and unfamiliar against her skin, twirling tentatively as if testing an equation's balance. At 8, she'd never worn anything but hand-me-downs, layers against the cold streets. The dress was James's idea, bought that very day amid his fumbling assurances. "You're not just smart, Sophia," he'd said, kneeling to adjust the hem. "You're special, and tonight we'll face that old world together." Her small hand slipped into his as the taxi pulled up to the glittering downtown hotel, the ballroom's lights spilling out like spilled diamonds. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her voice a whisper amid the hum of arriving guests. "Terrified," James admitted with a wry smile. "Me too," she confessed, clutching the origami fox in her pocket, a boho men, as she'd called it, its folds a reminder of survival's precision. "But we have each other now." The ballroom hushed as they entered, a sea of tailored suits and shimmering gowns parting like waves before a ghost. Whispers rippled. "Reynolds? With a child?" James felt the stares like pinpricks, his dusted-off tuxedo a poor armor against the judgment. Margaret approached warmly, embracing him before kneeling to Sophia's level. "And this must be the remarkable young lady I've heard about." Dinner unfolded in awkward tension, James fielding polite inquiries about his sabbatical while shielding Sophia from the undercurrents. She sat quietly, absently folding a napkin into a crane, her eyes darting across the room's opulence. The crystal chandeliers casting fractured light, the murmur of deals being struck over champagne flutes. It was a far cry from street corners, where numbers meant meals, not millions. Then, the voice cut through like a blade. "Well, if it isn't the great James Reynolds, gracing us with his presence." Victor Blackwood stood at their table, champagne flute in hand, his smile sharp as shattered glass. 3 years James's junior, but looking a decade fresher, success had preserved him like fine wine. The betrayal flashed in James's mind. Offshore accounts, plummeting shares, the boardroom coup that left him ruined. "Victor," James acknowledged coolly, his hand instinctively moving to Sophia's shoulder. Blackwood's eyes flicked to her dismissively. "Charity your new venture, Reynolds? Taking in strays?" James's blood surged, but before he could retort, the conversation shifted. Blackwood, ever the showman, launched into his presentation on a dais nearby, projecting slides of his latest triumph. A risk assessment algorithm boasting 87% accuracy in predicting market downturns. "Revolutionary," he proclaimed, the room nodding in deference. "It accounts for every variable, vulnerabilities mapped with surgical precision." Sophia leaned forward, her brow furrowing as she studied the digital display. The equations glowed, but something gnawed at her, like a fold out of place in origami. "Your variable is wrong," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the table. The room fell into a brittle silence. Blackwood's smile froze. "Excuse me?" "Your risk variable," Sophia continued, oblivious to the tension, her tone matter-of-fact. "It's underestimated by at least 40%. The formula doesn't account for compounding factors in extended bear markets." She reached for a napkin, borrowing a pen from Margaret, and sketched a series of corrections, elegant adjustments that simplified and fortified the model. Laughter erupted nervously from a few guests, but Walter Simmons, a grizzled hedge fund veteran at the table's end, leaned in with interest. "Let me see that, young lady." He studied her napkin, bushy eyebrows rising. "By God, she's right. Victor, your model overlooks these recursive loops. This fix, it's brilliant." Blackwood's face flushed crimson, his composure cracking like thin ice. "Absurd. I won't be lectured by a child, a street urchin playing at finance." His eyes narrowed on Sophia, and for a fleeting moment, recognition flickered. The origami fox peeked from her pocket, its paper form uncannily similar to one he'd seen years ago, in a forgotten report about a small bakery collapse. Collateral in one of his early schemes. Could this girl be connected? The thought chilled him. James rose, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "She's no urchin. She's my daughter." The word hung in the air, a declaration that surprised even him. The room buzzed as Blackwood stormed off, but Sophia remained fixed on the screen. "There's something strange about those numbers," she whispered to James. "Hidden patterns, like shadows in the folds." As they left the gala, the night air crisp against their flushed faces, James felt a dormant fire rekindle. Not just protectiveness, but analytical hunger. Sophia's insight had humiliated Blackwood, but it also unveiled cracks in his facade. On the taxi ride home, she turned to him, eyes wide. "That man, his math is sloppy, but it's more than that. The data feels wrong, deliberately." James nodded, glancing at a shadowed car trailing them briefly before vanishing. A note slipped under his door later that night? No, but the unease lingered. What if her genius had just painted a target on them both? As he tucked her in, the origami fox on her nightstand seemed to watch, its cunning eyes hinting at the unraveling web ahead. The origami fox sat sentinel on Sophia's nightstand, its paper eyes gleaming faintly in the moonlight, filtering through the blinds. James lingered in the doorway, her whispered words from the gala echoing. The data feels wrong, deliberately. Blackwood's flushed rage replayed in his mind, that momentary flicker of recognition, as if the man saw more in Sophia than a precocious child. Sleep eluded him that night. Instead, he paced the living room, the apartment's shadows lengthening like unspoken threats. By dawn, resolve hardened. If her genius had unveiled cracks in Blackwood's facade, they couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just curiosity, it was a reckoning. Sophia woke to the scent of fresh coffee, stronger than James's usual brew, signaling his unrest. She padded into the kitchen, clutching her sketchbook filled with napkin scribbles from the gala. I couldn't sleep either, she admitted, sliding onto a stool. Those numbers, they're not random, like a fox hiding in folds, but I can see the tail. James set a mug of milk before her, his hands steady despite the tremor in his voice. Show me. She spread the pages, equations dissecting Blackwood's algorithm, but deeper anomalies in the projections, subtle discrepancies that hinted at manipulation. See here? The risk variables masked something. If I adjust for hidden transfers, her pencil flew, revealing patterns that mirrored the collapse of Reynolds Financial, cascading failures engineered, not accidental. James leaned in, his financial acumen awakening like a dormant engine. This isn't a flaw, it's a design. Blackwood didn't just betray me, he orchestrated the fall to siphon billions, hiding them in shells to reemerge later. The realization burned, but with it came purpose. We need proof, real data. Sophia's eyes lit with determination. I can build something, a tracker, like predicting street traffic, but for money flows. They started small, huddled over James's old computer in the transformed office. Sophia's fingers danced across the keys, coding an algorithm that wove through public records of his company's collapse. Lines of logic unfolded like origami, each function a precise crease, detecting anomalies. James provided the context, transaction histories he'd salvage, patterns from his glory days. Hours blurred, the room filling with the hum of the machine and the scratch of her pencil, but they hit walls, encrypted layers that Sophia's nascent program couldn't pierce. We need someone who knows the systems inside out, James muttered, rubbing his temples. Sarah Lawson came to mind, his former lead systems architect at Reynolds Financial. She'd refused Blackwood's lucrative offer post-collapse, vanishing into a small consulting firm. James visited her downtown office that afternoon, the sterile space a far cry from their old boardrooms. Sarah rose, surprise etching her weary features. James Reynolds. Never thought I'd see you again. Hello, Sarah. I need your expertise, off the record. He explained carefully, omitting Sophia's full role at first, sharing data samples that painted the fraud's outline. Sarah's skepticism melted as she pored over the files. These signatures, they're modified from protocols I built. The collapse was too clean, too complete. I always suspected sabotage. James hesitated, then revealed the source. An 8-year-old decoded this. My daughter, adopted recently. She's extraordinary. Sarah's eyes widened, but she leaned forward. If a child sees it, then it's real. But why me? Because Blackwood betrayed you too, James said softly. I know about the affair, the promises he made, then discarded when you questioned his ethics. Her face tightened, old wounds reopening. He used me, then threatened my career. Fine, I'm in for justice, not revenge. Back home, Sarah met Sophia, the apartment buzzing with new energy. The girl demonstrated her algorithm, now refined with Sarah's input on back-end structures. It's like a phoenix, Sophia said, naming it on a whim, rising from ashes to burn the lies. Project Phoenix took shape in the storage closet turned operations center, whiteboards scrawled with timelines, a humming server running simulations. They worked late, James fetching takeout while Sarah and Sophia dissected code. One night, under the glow of screens, they uncovered the core. Blackwood's scheme wasn't theft, it was a timed illusion. Assets vanished into offshore mazes, set to reconsolidate in 18 months, post-investigations. Deliberate chaos, Sarah whispered, tracing a diagram. He triggered the plunge to buy low, hide high. James clenched his fists. And the twist? He envied me from the start. Back in business school, I edged him out for top honors. This was personal. Sophia nodded, her young face solemn. Numbers show jealousy. Inefficient risks for petty gains. Weeks intensified their bond. Sarah sharing stories of her fallout with Blackwood. Sophia folding origami models of fraud patterns. James feeling alive amid the hunt. But cracks appeared. Rebecca Harper, the social worker overseeing the adoption, called more frequently, her questions probing. How's Sophia adjusting? Any unusual activities? James brushed it off as routine, but unease grew. One evening, as they sorted transaction pathways, Sophia grew quiet. If we succeed, what about the people hurt? Lost homes, savings? James paused. We'll return what's stolen, but more, your algorithm could prevent future frauds, like a financial shield. Excitement sparked in her eyes. Then let's refine it. Make it see ahead. Their progress accelerated, the Phoenix algorithm evolving to predict manipulations. Yet shadows loomed. Rebecca visited unannounced one afternoon, her eyes lingering on the whiteboard's equations. This looks intense. For a child's education? Just puzzles, James deflected, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. That night, as they locked away files, the phone rang. Rebecca again, her voice edged with tremor. We need to talk urgently about Sophia's safety. James's blood chilled. Was she an ally or a threat? As he hung up, a distant car idled outside, headlights piercing the dark. The web was tightening, and Project Phoenix might demand a price they weren't ready to pay. The phone's click echoed in the quiet apartment like a lock snapping shut. Rebecca's urgent tone, about Sophia's safety, lingering in the air like a veiled threat. James set the receiver down slowly, his gaze drifting to the window where headlights had flickered moments before, now vanished into the night. Paranoia or something more. Project Phoenix had unearthed too much. Blackwood's web of deceit was vast, and Rebecca's probing visits felt less like oversight and more like surveillance. We can't ignore this, he murmured to Sarah and Sophia. The operations center's whiteboards glowing under dim lamps, equations mocking their fragile progress. Sophia, perched on a stool with her sketchbook, nodded solemnly. Her questions last time, about the computer, the late nights, it's like she's calculating us. Sarah crossed her arms, her face etched with the scars of her own betrayal by Blackwood. Coincidence? Or is she his pawn? We need eyes on everything. They installed discrete cameras that night, simple setups Sarah rigged from spare parts, hidden in vents and bookshelves. Just in case, James said, though his chest tightened with foreboding. The algorithm hummed on the server, now at 75% refinement, tracing Blackwood's hidden assets like a hunter closing in. But safety came first. They established protocols, encrypted backups, emergency bags packed, a code Phoenix for evacuation. The cafe meeting with Rebecca the next day overlooked Millennium Park, a public spot for security. James arrived early, choosing a corner table with views of all entrances, his coat heavy with the weight of concealed printouts. Rebecca appeared on time, her usual poise frayed, hair pulled tight, shadows under her eyes like bruises. Thank you for meeting, she said, declining coffee, her fingers drumming nervously on the cup. How's Sophia with her advanced work? She asked, too casually. Thriving, James replied, instincts honed from boardroom battles alerting him to the probe. What's this urgent matter? I've received concerns about her environment. Electronic equipment, irregular hours, a frequent visitor like Ms. Lawson. She leaned forward, voice dropping. If you're involved in something risky, James interrupted firmly. Our home is appropriate. Sarah tutors Sophia in puzzles. The equipment is educational. Rebecca studied him, then nodded, relief feigned. I believe you, but I need an unscheduled visit today. Of course, he lied smoothly. Tomorrow morning instead? Clear my schedule. As they parted, James texted Sarah, secure everything. Now. Back at Sarah's office, they relocated sensitive files, and the algorithm's code was backed up on encrypted drives. Sophia, returning from her university math session, grasped the shift instantly. She's working for him, isn't she? We don't know, James said, though doubt gnawed. That evening, alone in the apartment to maintain appearances, he activated the cameras. The feed showed Rebecca approaching hours early, under the cover of dusk. She picked the lock with practiced ease, slipping inside like a shadow. Sarah whispered over their secure line as they watched remotely. Thorough, professional. Rebecca moved systematically, photographing documents, planting tiny devices in lamps and outlets. In Sophia's room, she paused by the bed, glancing at the origami fox before continuing. James tensed, fists clenched. Enough! Let's welcome her. They burst in as she emerged from the hallway, Rebecca's face draining of color. James, I was concerned and... The cameras caught it all, he said quietly, voice steel. Her composure shattered. She sank into a chair. He made me. Blackwood has dirt, old errors in my files. He'd ruin me unless I monitored you. At first, just reports, but after the gala, he's obsessed with Sophia. Her math, her routines. He thinks she knows something threatening. James loomed closer, anger simmering. And you told him? Only surface details, she insisted, tears welling. But he suspects you're digging. He's connected. Powerful allies protect him. From the doorway, Sophia's voice cut through. I'm not just a street kid anymore. I have a family, and we're stopping him. Rebecca's regret flashed genuinely. I'm sorry, the adoption was real. I believed in it. But now, James dismissed her coldly. Out. Take your devices. The breach changed everything. They accelerated, but Blackwood's reach closed in. That night at 3:17 a.m., splintering wood jolted James awake. Code Phoenix, he hissed, grabbing Sophia and bolting for the service exit. Heavy footsteps thundered behind as they descended the back stairs, rain-slicked alley welcoming them into the cold. Sarah's sedan idled 3 blocks south. They found us faster than expected, she said, peeling away. The devices must have remotes. Separation protocol, James ordered grimly. Sophia's safety first. At the safe house, a modest apartment above a bookstore, dawn broke as they unpacked essentials. Sophia's face was resolute. How long separated? Not long, James promised, kneeling. I'll draw attention publicly. You and Sarah finish the algorithm. But he withheld the truth, his blood pressure spiking again, the doctor's warnings of crisis. Promise you'll take your meds, she demanded, hugging him fiercely. The parting tore at him. James checked into a downtown hotel, making conspicuous appearances, interviews hinting at comebacks to lure surveillance. Meanwhile, Sophia and Sarah worked remotely, communicating via her devised system. Math problems on a Prodigy's forum, embedded codes only they deciphered. 2 weeks in, the strain broke him. During a misdirection meeting with a journalist, chest pain crushed him like a vice. He awoke in Chicago General's cardiac unit, monitors beeping, Blackwood's suited watchers lurking outside. From his bed, he accessed the forum. A new equation from Sophia's pseudonym. Decoded. We're safe. Algorithm at 87%. Focus on recovery. Tears pricked his eyes. Even apart, her mind bridged the gap. As nurses passed, he whispered, a girl who doesn't need saving. She's saving the system. Released with strict orders, he pushed on, assembling witnesses via discreet calls. But in the quiet night, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. Accept 50% of the assets, or the alternative is devastating. Last chance. The offer hung like a noose, tempting yet treacherous. What price for silence? The anonymous text glowed on James's phone screen like a venomous lure. Accept 50% of the assets, or the alternative is devastating. Last chance. He stared at it in the sterile hush of his hotel room, the cardiac monitor's faint beeps from his recent stay still echoing in his mind. $4.7 billion, half the stolen fortune, enough to rebuild lives, fund dreams, vanish into quiet exile. Temptation whispered, but Sophia's decoded message from the forum burned brighter. Not about money, about truth. He deleted the text, his decision crystallizing like frost on glass. No deals with the devil who'd shattered his world. Project Phoenix would fly. Consequences be damned. Reunited at Sarah's office after weeks of separation, the team huddled around the conference table, evidence sprawled like battle maps. Printouts of trace transactions, timelines of fraud. Sophia's algorithm now complete at 94% accuracy. The air hummed with tension, the scent of stale coffee mingling with the metallic tang of determination. "We're going public," James announced, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Full disclosure, no settlements." Sarah nodded, pushing her glasses up. "The algorithm doesn't just expose, it predicts. We offer it open source, a safeguard for the world." Sophia, her small hands organizing folders, looked up solemnly. "On the streets, I learned justice doesn't happen. People make it." She squeezed James's hand, her touch a reminder of origami's fragile strength, folds that held against storms. They moved swiftly, evidence dispatched simultaneously, digital packages to the SEC's Chicago office, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, entrusted journalists. James and Sophia headed to Director Eleanor Harmon at the SEC, the morning crisp with autumn chill. The security guard eyed them dubiously, a disgraced CEO and an 8-year-old in school uniform, but ushered them in. Harmon, a veteran with steel-gray hair and sharper eyes, greeted them with measured curiosity. "Mr. Reynolds, your request was unusual." "What we have is equally so," James replied, nodding to Sophia. She opened her laptop, her young voice clear as she walked through the data. Mathematical signatures of sabotage, hidden asset trails, the algorithm's irrefutable proofs. 98.7% certainty, she concluded. The numbers don't lie. Harmon removed her glasses, rubbing her eyes. "If verified, this is the most sophisticated fraud we've documented." By afternoon, warrants flew, raids on Blackwood Capital, trading halts, headlines erupting like fireworks. Blackwood's counterattack was swift, a barrage of venom. Smear campaigns flooded business news. Failed CEO's desperate hoax. One headline blared from his allied outlets. Another questioned Sophia. "Imaginary prodigy? Reynolds invents child to salvage reputation." Whispers in financial circles painted James as bitter, unstable, the girl of fabrication. Holed up in a federal safe house, James and Sophia watched the storm unfold on a secure tablet. "They're saying I'm not real," Sophia observed analytically, her fingers tapping rhythmic patterns. "Fascinating strategy." "How so?" James asked, masking his fury. "They can't attack the math, so they discredit the source." She smiled faintly, folding a napkin into a fox mid-conversation. A habit now, her mind's anchor. The tide turned as analysts worldwide scrutinized the released algorithm snippets. Walter Simmons, the hedge fund veteran from the gala, called James, "That girl's creation revolutionizes security. Wall Street's buzzing. Your evidence holds." "I'm testifying." Former employees corroborated suspicious activities pre-collapse. Blackwood's secretive meetings. International banks froze accounts flagged by the algorithm, billions clawed back before vanishing again. By evening, indictments dropped. Blackwood and associates charged with securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction. In his opulent office, Blackwood paced like a caged predator, screens flashing damning reports. He'd underestimated the child, that street rat with eyes like daggers. The algorithm, her algorithm, had predicted his every evasion. He dialed a shadowed contact. Bury them deeper, make it personal. But the math prevailed. Journalists like Maria Chen aired exposés, her interview with James and Sophia going viral in financial circles. "Why freely share this innovation?" Maria asked in their modest safe house, cameras rolling. Sophia answered, voice confident. "Math belongs to everyone. It's a language for patterns, for protection. Keeping it secret defeats the purpose." "And to doubters claiming an 8-year-old couldn't create this?" Maria pressed. "Examine the numbers," Sophia said. "They don't care about age." James added proudly, "A brilliant mind taught me that value isn't in dollars. Beyond that, let the work speak." Weeks compressed into a whirlwind, 70% of assets located, proceedings for restitution underway. Blackwood's empire crumbled, his arrest broadcast live, cuffed in his penthouse, face a mask of defiant fury. That night, as Sophia tackled advanced homework at the kitchen table, James's phone buzzed, an anonymous message. "This isn't over, Reynolds." He deleted it, focusing on her, the origami fox beside her notebook, a symbol of their triumph. Yet unease lingered. Blackwood's words hinted at unfinished threads, allies lurking in shadows. As James tucked her in, he whispered, "We did it." She smiled sleepily. But legacies don't end. They grow. 1 year later, on the sidewalk where it began, the true reckoning would reveal itself, not in vengeance, but in enduring light. 1 year later, the Chicago sidewalk gleamed under a crisp winter sun, the same spot where rain had once pooled around a girl's cardboard display of origami dreams. James and Sophia stood there, the air carrying a familiar chill, but everything else transformed, like an equation solved, revealing beauty in its resolution. The distant skyline, once a mocking reminder of his fall, now held the silhouette of the Reynolds Foundation for Educational Innovation, its modest headquarters rising from recovered assets like a phoenix from ashes. Blackwood rotted in prison, serving the first of 15 years, his empire dust. But true reckoning wasn't vengeance. It was this enduring light, illuminating paths for others. Sophia, now 9, stood taller, her posture radiating the confidence of a child who knew her worth. Loved, valued, unbreakable. She gazed at the empty pavement, fingers absently folding a scrap of paper into a fox, the motif that had bound them. "Hard to believe it started here," she said, her voice carrying the quiet wisdom that still astonished him. $1 each, if kept dry." James rested a hand on her shoulder, his own frame steadier, the lines on his face softened by purpose rather than etched by despair. "Sometimes the most ordinary places birth the extraordinary. You could have just taken the sandwich and run." She smiled, tucking the fox into his pocket. "Most would have walked by, but you saw me, not the street kid, but the numbers inside." They strolled toward the foundation building, funded by 20% of the reclaimed billions. Restitution for victims, but also seed for change. Inside, the lobby hummed with activity, staff reviewing applications for scholarships, walls lined with testimonials from gifted children plucked from poverty. A display case caught the light, housing the original origami fox alongside a framed printout of Sophia's algorithm's first code line. Beneath, the plaque read, "Extraordinary solutions often come from unexpected places." James's office overlooked the skyline, a far cry from his old 52nd floor throne. No mahogany desk dominated, instead a shared workstation with 2 chairs side by side. Sophia settled into hers, pulling a notebook from her backpack. "I've been working on something new," she announced, her eyes alight with that familiar spark. "An extension of the algorithm, not just for fraud, but to spot patterns in underserved communities. Mathematical signatures of hidden genius, like kids using numbers to survive, just as I did." He paged through her notes, awe-swelling. Equations modeled aptitude indicators, unconventional problem-solving in low-income data sets, predictive flags for prodigies overlooked by systems. This could change everything. Find them early, nurture them. But her expression turned grave, a twist in the tale unfolding. "I tested it on public records. Found 3 cases already. A boy in Detroit calculating traffic for his family's vendor cart. A girl in New Orleans optimizing flood routes with homemade maps. But one, his patterns match fraud victims, like Blackwood's old schemes. Indirect harm. Lost homes leading to street life. There are more out there, Dad. Hurt by the same shadows." James's breath caught, the past echoes resurfacing not as ghosts but calls to action. Blackwood's web had tentacles, his devastating alternative, perhaps more than bluster, lingering allies, unfinished ripples. Yet this wasn't defeat, it was legacy's next fold. "Then we'll find them. The Foundation's first mission, your algorithm as a beacon." They spent the afternoon refining it, Sophia's insights co-authoring papers with university professors who'd once doubted her age. In her advanced math class, she now assisted them, transforming financial security into broader pattern recognition across fields. James watched her, marveling at the journey, from his despairing wander into the rain to this symphony of redemption. As evening fell, they returned to the sidewalk, the wind whispering through bare branches. James pulled out paper, and they sat on the curb, folding together. A new creation, a bird with wings etched in fresh equations. "Do you ever miss the old life?" she asked, her small fingers guiding his. "The power? The buildings with your name?" He considered the question, stirring memories of empty triumphs. Certain comforts, yes, but not the void they masked. The man I was becoming, defined by ledgers, not lives. He met her gaze, emotion thickening his throat. "You didn't just save me, Sophia. You rescued the human part in me, the father I never knew I could be. From bankruptcy to this, a legacy of hearts, not holdings." She leaned against him, the bird complete in her palm. "And you gave me roots. We built something that lasts, beyond numbers, beyond us." A gust caught the origami, lifting it briefly before settling it at their feet, unbroken. In that moment, James saw the true treasure, not reclaimed billions, but the bond that turned loss into light, genius into grace. As they walked homeward, Sophia's extension algorithm already humming in his mind, a new mission dawned, not ending with Blackwood's fall, but echoing forward, folding hope into the world's hidden corners. And there you have it, the extraordinary journey of James and Sophia, a tale of downfall, discovery, and the unbreakable legacy born from unexpected bonds. From a bankrupt millionaire's chance encounter with a homeless genius to a revolution in justice and innovation, it reminds us that true value lies not in fortunes lost, but in the lives we touch and the purpose we build. What did this story stir in you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Did it inspire you, surprise you, or make you reflect on second chances? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. Your time and engagement mean the world. Until next time, stay curious and keep folding your own paths to greatness. See you soon.